I'd like to welcome everybody to tonight's regular planning board meeting for Thursday, March 16th. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for both December and January. Any comments or questions on the minutes? No? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved. Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And the chair votes aye. Moving on to number 2, public hearings. Item A, the Portsmouth Planning Board is conducting a public hearing to take public comment on proposed amendments to the city's 1995 zoning ordinances amended. The amendments include changes to the following sections. Article 1, Section 10-102, definitions, by adding certain definitions. Item 2, Article 2, Section 10-207, Table 3, uses in mixed residential districts. Article 2, Section 10-208, Table 4, uses in business districts. Article 2, Section 10-209, uses in airport districts. Article 2, Section 10-209, Table 5, uses in industrial districts by adding and expanding financial institutions. 3, Article 3, Section 10-305A, industrial. Table 11, dimensional requirements by changing dimensional requirements. And 4, Article 4, Section 400, supplementary regulations by adding a new section 10-405, standards for drive-through facilities. Copies of the proposed amendments are on file in the Planning Department office and available for public inspection. This hearing was tabled at the February 16, 2006 Planning Board meeting. Do I have a motion to take it off the table?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye. David?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. At the last public hearing, we had a lot of discussion as to actually what the impacts of this use might be on other districts, and so planning staff went back to refine it a little further. And if you look on page 2, what we're basically showing is that we're going to treat financial institutions as a use citywide and regulated by particular zoning districts. So what you have are the use districts and an indication of what portion, if not all portions, of a financial institution would be allowed in the district. For example, in the mixed residential office and the mixed residential business, distinctions are made as to whether you could have a financial service office, a retail bank, or an impound lot. Additionally, the staff worked and did an additional review on the drive-through standards. Lucy can probably give a quick review that Deb Finnegan was reviewing the standards, and we'll get to that in a second, I guess. And also working with the drive-through standards, these are rather specific, and what we're thinking is rather than putting these in the zoning ordinance, that we may transfer these to the site review regulations, which would actually simplify the process. So the primary change that you have before you, and I'll go through them, is to add the distinction of financial institutions to other districts in the city. So for example, in the mixed residential office district, financial institutions would not be allowed, nor would any of their components. However, in the mixed residential business, you could have a financial service office, a retail bank, but you couldn't have an impound lot. And additionally, the drive-through facilities would not be allowed as an accessory use. Hence, on number 29 there, you do not see it as recognized. In the central business A, central business B, general business, business, and waterfront business, again, distinctions are made between financial service offices, which are allowed in all districts except the waterfront business, a retail bank, which is only permitted by special exception in the general business, and an impound lot, which is only permitted as a special exception in the general business. And then the drive-through facilities are only allowed as an accessory use by special exception in the general business and business district. You saw how it was handled in the industrial, office research, and waterfront industrial. Again, in that district, you could only have as an accessory use a drive-through in the office research. New to this ordinance would be the distinctions in the airport, airport industrial, P's industrial, and the airport business commercial districts, where they are also regulated. I think at this time, we've really largely created the vetting of this. By the definitions, these uses are regulated now in more districts, and they're allowed in the same district that financial institutions were previously allowed. But it's probably the newest part is the standards for drive-through facilities. And if Lucy's ready now, perhaps we can address what Deb Finnegan indicated to you.
I'm sorry, but I have not completely finished working with what she has done, so I'm not able to do that at the moment.
Okay. What we would like to do at this time is actually to continue to table this, primarily so that we can evaluate moving the drive-through regulations to the site review regulations and making sure that they are properly referenced still in the zoning ordinance. But to try to get a regulation that is specific to the use out of the land use permissive part, which basically says what you can do with the use, and get it into the site review regulations. We think that will simplify the ordinance, and we'd like to bring that back to you probably at your next meeting. And at that time, we may also be working with some larger zoning components, and we can assess when this should move forward. I'd be glad to answer any questions, but I think most of the materials are reasonably familiar to you, and they arise from the discussions that we had at the last meeting.
Actually, I just have
Mr. Hoffman.
Dave,
Yeah.
could you go again why item 29 is blank and not an N in there?
Because accessory uses, we don't generally list out what they are, so it,
Two.
yeah, so if it's not there, it's saying it's not permitted. Basically, that blank is the same as an N.
I'm
If
just
we
wondering
have to
to the
clear-
casual user, an N might mean more.
Right, perhaps we'll add that. The intent is definitely that it's
Yeah.
not there. It's
Yeah,
because it's an accessory use that gets a little confusing.
Probably only planners would understand that, right?
I doubt it. I'll take that as an add the N in.
Yeah, add the N in. Mr. Wells.
would this be coming back to us as just an item on the agenda or as another public hearing?
What would you wish?
I think it'd be probably better as another item on the agenda that we could review. If we're bringing it back with a few of these things, I mean, if you're taking it completely out of the zoning ordinance and putting it into site review, I think that's more of a mode of discussion amongst the board before we even get it to a public hearing.
Then we'll do it that way.
Certainly.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
No?
With that, I'd entertain a request that you table this to the, sorry.
Mr. Cope.
One quick question. Included in our packet was the subdivision rules and regulations and site review regulations, a couple of drafts. That is to be considered independent of this. Is that
Correct.
correct? Okay, I just want to make sure of
That'll
that.
come
Thank
later
you.
in the agenda.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Do I have a motion?
April 20th.
Move the table.
To the
Second.
April 20th meeting?
Second.
Moved and seconded? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye. Before I move on to item B, I'd just like to welcome Paige Roberts back as an alternate. I was remiss in mentioning that earlier, Paige. I do apologize. It is great to have you back.
Thanks, John.
So I'm sure on behalf of the whole board, they'd like to welcome you back. Getting back to the public hearings, item B, the application of Thomas J. Flatley, owner and Home Depot applicant for property located at 500 Spalding Turnpike, wherein a conditional use permit is requested as allowed in Article 6, Section 10-608B of the zoning ordinance to allow the demolition of the existing building, the construction of 145,193 square feet of retail store, and a 19,200 square foot pad building and corresponding parking within an inland wetlands protection district. Said property is shown on Assessor's Plan 238 as Lot 20 and lies within a general business district. This application was tabled at the February 16, 2006 Planning Board meeting.
Yeah. Yes.
Do I have a motion?
Second?
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye. David, if you could just speak quickly on this application?
Yes, Mr. Chair, the applicant and the city planning department have come to a concurrence to request that this be tabled to the April 20th meeting. The reason is the applicant and the city are working on some issues of interest that might potentially affect the conditional use of recommendation that has been granted. And rather than complicate the picture further, the applicant and the city have agreed to support a request that you table this to your April 20th meeting.
So moved?
Second?
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Before we move on to the next application, as I live in the neighborhood, I have to recuse myself from applications C and D.
Thank you. Page?
Just gonna pull up.
Okay. I'm going to read applications C and D. We'll be voting on them separately, but I will read them together. Item C, the applicant of Cicero A. and Ruth Lewis, owners in Changing Places LLC applicant, for property located off of Falkland Way, wherein site review approval is requested for the creation of 24 new townhome units on a proposed 8-lot subdivision, with all of the proposed lots having access off a proposed extension of Crescent Way, extending through to Saratoga Way, with related paving, utilities, landscaping, drainage, and associated site improvements. Said properties are shown on Assessor Plan 212 as Lot 123 and lies within a General Residence B district. This application was tabled at the February 16, 2006 Planning Board meeting. I will also read application D. The application of Cicero A. and Ruth Lewis owners and Changing Places LLC applicant for the property located off of Falkland Way, wherein final subdivision approval is requested for the creation of an 8-lot subdivision ranging in lot size from 10,029 square feet to 27,454 square feet, with all of the proposed lots having access off a proposed extension of Crescent Way, extending through to Saratoga Way. Said property is lying in a zone wherein a minimum lot size is 5,000 square feet and 80 feet of continuous street frontage is required. Said property is located in a General Residence B district and is shown on Assessor Plan 212 as Lot 123. Plat plan is on file in the Planning Department office and is identified as Plan 17-01-05. This application was also tabled at the February 16, 2006 Planning Board meeting. Do I have a motion to take it off the table?
So moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye. Who's here tonight on behalf of the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Bernie Peelich, I'm here on behalf of the owner and the applicant. With me this evening is Dennis Moulton from Ames MSC, as well as J. Corey Caldwell from Ames MSC, John O'Neill and Michael Brigham, the principals of Changing Places LLC, and Mr. and Mrs. Lewis. As you know, this matter was tabled back in February and referred back to the Technical Advisory Committee for a re-examination of certain traffic issues. That occurred at the March TAC meeting, and basically after reviewing additional evidence, the Technical Advisory Committee again favorably recommended this and did not change their previous recommendation. I will be brief this evening, simply to say that we began this process back in August. We've been before the Technical Advisory Committee on numerous occasions. We've worked very diligently with city staff in coming up with a proposal that has satisfied all of the Technical Advisory Committee members and aspects of the site plan review criteria, and I have to compliment Mr. Holden for working very diligently to work with various department heads to answer questions that have been raised by board members, by members of the neighborhood, and I believe all of those issues have finally been answered, and hopefully these two applications can be approved this evening. Thank you. I'll introduce Dennis, who can go over any questions you have on the site plan.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Dennis Moulton with Ames MSC. Briefly, I'll just go over what occurred since our last meeting. We did go back to the TAC committee. At that time, our traffic engineer, John Terrio, came down from Bangor and presented his findings to the committee based on additional counts that we did out at Atlantic Heights. You should all have a copy of that report in your packets. Basically, it shows that the level of service will be unaffected at the 3 intersections on Raleigh, on Raleigh Way, that you would expect cars to go through from the new development. He's showing level of services, the time of delay time, for the intersections virtually the same in both the pre and post development scenarios. John couldn't be with us tonight. He has previous engagement tonight, so he didn't make the trip down, but I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you would have on the traffic study or any additional questions you have on the site plan itself. At this time, I would like to introduce Corey to go over the subdivision plan and present that information.
Thank you, Dennis. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Corey Caldwell of Ames MSC. You may recall back in October 2005, we received preliminary subdivision approval on this site. Since that time, there has only been 3 changes to the subdivision plan, and that is the addition of 3 easements. 1, there is a utility easement running across the southerly portions of lots 3, 4, 5, and 6. The portion of this easement across lots 3, 4, and 5 is for drainage improvements. The wide part of the easement to the rear of lot 5 is for a storm drainage retention basin. The easement across lot 6 is for drainage and the extension of a water line from Saratoga Way to map 212, lot 21. Second change, access easement across lot 5. This easement is designed to go across the driveway proposed for that lot, and the purpose of the easement is to give access to the rear of the lot to facilitate maintenance on the drainage system and retention basin. Third and final change to the subdivision plan was a landscape easement across the front of lots 7 and 8. This easement was a requirement of the Technical Advisory Committee. Since the sidewalk is proposed on this side of the road, it was felt that a landscape easement would provide enough space behind the sidewalk to add some additional plantings. We understand that upon final approval, we will submit GIS data to the city and install permanent boundary monuments as required by Department of Public Works. Bernie, myself, and Dennis are all here and happy to address any questions. Thank you.
Any questions for the applicant? Board have any questions for the applicant? Hearing none, I will now open the public hearing. Anybody in the public wish to speak to, for, or against the application?
Actually, more like a couple of questions for the board or the department. For the record, I'm Raymond Will. I live at 125 Preble Way in the Atlantic Heights. I also serve on the Portsmouth Planning Board. At our desks, we had received word that the legal department and the planning and the applicant have some level of dispute about the nature of a paper street, Falkland Way. There was some concern about the neighbors that sometimes maintain that paper street in their backyards in Raleigh Way. As I understand the rules and regulations, if the street is abandoned, then it goes basically 50-50 right down the paper street to the applicant, to the abutters, and it's basically shared. Does that change depending on what result happens? Because some of those neighbors have been maintaining parcels of what is Falkland Way for the last 30 to 40 to 50 years on their property.
I'll ask David to answer that question.
Actually, perhaps the best way I could resolve that, the board members do have in front of you the memorandum from the city attorney regarding this application, and perhaps for the benefit of the public, I can read it. That'd be all right with you?
Yes, absolutely.
In connection with the pending subdivision and site review application for the redevelopment of this project, the planning board has expressed a concern as to whether or not a paper street identified as Falkland Way is required to be discontinued by the city council. On behalf of the developer, Attorney Pelich has forwarded documentation in support of the developer's position that because Falkland Way was neither dedicated to public use by its prior owner nor accepted as a city street by the city, the paper street does not exist and therefore does not require discontinuance by the city council. The legal issue is complex and unresolved. However, both David Holden and I feel that the planning board is otherwise prepared to approve the subdivision and site plan for the development, that this issue should not hold up final approval. Rather, we would recommend that in that case, the planning board condition final approval upon the determination by the city's legal department, quote, that no municipal interest exists in the paper street Falkland Way, end quote. With such a condition, if it is concluded that there was never any dedication or acceptance, then the condition will be satisfied. In the event there was a dedication and acceptance, then the city council will be requested to discontinue the municipal interest in order to satisfy that condition. My interpretation of that would be when or if either or both are completed, the ownership of what we know as Falkland Way will revert to the owners of record on either side. But at this point, it's not really possible to say that, only that it looks like that might be the eventual conclusion.
And in any case, at the conclusion of the application, that street would not really be usable anyway, I would assume, as it relatively small, as mapped out, and there's using another access way anyway.
It says it isn't usable now.
Yeah, okay. The second question I had was, in a separate cover, not in our packets, we'd received some information about some preliminary findings. One of them related to the potential one weighing of Raleigh Way, and I didn't notice any further information of that in my packet. Can I assume that that was discussed but not determined as a viable option, the one weighing of Raleigh Way?
Well, actually, what you're referring to, which I trust the board members have, is the actual report that went from the Technical Advisory Committee to the Mayor Marchand and members of the council, as well as to the planning board. Among the findings was that considerable amount of effort had been done in preparing traffic improvements out in the Heights, done by Wilbur Smith, I believe. And part of that project had looked at whether or not there should be changes in the traffic patterns and suggested that that be an issue to be looked at. The recommendation that TAC is making is that when these improvements are going to be scheduled, that it may behoove the city at that time to see whether or not traffic pattern changes would be appropriate. Mm-hmm. And that would actually be something that would be very much under the direction of the neighborhood and working with the city.
But that would be
beyond
done
the scope of this
separate
project.
from this. Okay. Finally, a couple of meetings ago, I had made an argument that criteria H in the site review regulations, also with the nature of the fact that this is a completion of the original intent of the Atlantic Heights, was that the homes that were built on this site should be of a certain size and facade, barring any design review standards, somewhere between design review standards and just leaving it alone. I thought the truth lied. And at that meeting, we really didn't have any sort of representation of what the buildings might look at. But then the last meeting we did, and looking at the gray and black buildings that, and correct me if I'm wrong, look nothing like the surrounding heights, I get to do something here standing at this podium that I really don't get to do sitting on the board. I can actually say what I think the vision for this application should be, as a neighbor instead of as someone on the board who can't write an applicant's application for them. My vision of this would be to have exactly the same number of units and buildings, that a nice, healthy yes vote be given to this application, but that the buildings reflect its historic character, not just in the sense of how it looks, but also in the sense that it was built as naturally affordable housing for the area, that I think this project should go forward. There is nothing wrong with this project that cannot be fixed with what's right with this project. But I still think that putting buildings there that look gray and white like other, developments that we've seen around the area, that's fine elsewhere in the city. But I think it's glaringly like a large thumb in a very historic area. That said, I don't think that should impede this project in any way, but I think it could be used as a stipulation with criteria H. I've made this argument before, but now that you've seen the representations last meeting, I think somewhere between those representations and maybe my argument 2 months ago, maybe the truth lies. I have open any questions you might have.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody in the public wish to speak to, for, or against this application? Third time, saying no on rise, I'll now close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like, if the board's indulgence, if you've gone through the minutes, you'll notice that there's a fair amount of representation, and if the board would indulge me, I would just like to work perhaps with Attorney Peelich and Corey to make sure that some of these finer details were incorporated in the final plans, because if they're not, we can incorporate them in as conditions at the end if the board chooses to grant. With your indulgence, could I just check out a few of the issues?
Yes.
I think probably Corey's wishing now that Dennis was here. At several points, one concern was that the water service coming into the houses would be 1 inch and not 3/4 inch. I believe the plans reflect that now. Dennis is here.
Yes, I am here.
Corey, you are saved.
Saved by the bell. Yes, they were spec'd as 1 inch.
Okay, Mr. Cravens also asked that the loam on the site be at least 6 feet because it's better for the roots and less water. Is that shown somewhere in the details?
I believe he wanted
6
6
inches,
inches.
Kind of like 6 feet.
His request was that if an irrigation system were put in, that 6 inches alone be put in so as to retain more moisture in the soil.
Actually, I checked it. It was also that all loam on the site be at least 6 inches.
Okay, well, if that's, I didn't note that on the plan, so that should carry forward as a stipulation then.
Okay, I hope somebody's making a note. We did get the retaining walls in, correct? That Mr. Allen was looking for?
Yes.
Are we now showing, I forget which one we're going for, but the planning board has a standard on granite curbing for the street, and there was some issue as, I think we had vertical out there rather than sloped, and that we were going to go with the vertical?
Yes, and that was made, that change was made.
Okay, I believe that may be a waiver of our regulations, but the department is recommending that if there's a favorable vote. All water, sewer, and gas lines will be oriented so they are at least 5 feet from underground utility. No, the plantings would be 5 feet from the underground utilities.
Yes.
The swale and level spreader was a bit of an issue. Did we get the diagrams, the sketches on the final plans, the armored, this, that, and the other?
Well, the resolution of that was there was a significant change in the drainage system. The level spreader no longer exists. There's just a swale. And it was, the slope was armored at the outlet.
The water service on Lot 1 that crossed the lot line was changed?
Yes.
In the absence of the test pits, Mr. DeFos's was looking for a detail to make sure that you would run into what you would do if you didn't run into good material.
Yes, and we added under drains for the swale.
And there's a fill detail for the roadway cross-section.
Yes, there is.
Attorney Peelich is putting language in the deeds about the care and the maintenance of the sensitive areas.
Yes, in fact, I corresponded with Peter Britz and asked that he provide me with that language. I have not heard back from him, but we certainly will.
And also to indicate to the board that if this is approved, that the department and legal department will work on the 10-foot vegetative buffer. That language is fairly standard because we've done it at Nathaniel Hawthorne, and it's a similar project, but that would still be outstanding at the present
Correct.
time. And the last one that we would recommend as a condition is that a construction management plan should be prepared and approved by the Departments of Public Works, Legal, and Planning, and that plan to include any blasting-related issues. The only reason we've done this is a very rare project that has been about 4 months in TAC, and the applicant has worked very closely with staff, but there are an awful lot of details that have gone into this, and I think frankly it's what makes this project very approachable at this point by the board. And I applaud the applicant for working with us to get some of these finer details done.
We'll be voting on item C for site plan approval first, and then on item D for final subdivision approval. So do I hear a motion on, for item C, site review approval?
So moved, Mr. Chairman, and with the associated stipulations and with the additional stipulation relative to having legal department check out that there is no municipal interest in Falkland Way.
Okay.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion?
Well, I would like to say that with any development, we have a lot of pluses and minuses. And I feel in this particular case, the pluses far outweigh the minuses.
Okay.
And that's the reason for a favorable motion.
Okay. Did you have any? No? Councilor Dwyer, did you have anything?
I just wanted to, I wasn't here at the last meeting, but I listened on the web archives to your lengthy deliberation around the traffic study. And as the councilor received the recommendations coming from TAC around traffic, and I guess I would just like to hear the satisfaction of those of you who were very intent on the traffic questions as to which aspects of the recommendations from TAC to the council satisfy the traffic concerns that were raised. Does that make sense?
Is that to me or to the applicant?
Oh, no, really to
We got a motion
to
on the
us.
table for
Okay.
discussion.
I think the most important thing to understand is that this is actually a rather limited project with very limited traffic. However, the city, through the CIP and through the Community Development Program, is actually put a significant amount of money and continues to put significant monies into the infrastructure improvements that actually the city is properly responsible for. And what TAC basically found is there was no rational nexus that could be extended to any other street than the improvements that they were providing. But in recognition of particular problems out at the Heights, TAC took recognition of the Wilbur-Smith study, suggests that it be considered for updating at the appropriate time, and that what you may want to do when you work with the neighborhood is to assess what the needs are. Because what it comes down to is either expanding a street so you can have parking and sidewalks and, say, parking on both sides, or it may be looking at traffic patterns so you don't have to do that so significantly. But in either fashion, those improvements exceeded what one could turn to this developer for.
So the remedy is essentially the acceleration of looking at a variety of ways to improve traffic conditions around that area.
The council, as the policy-setting body, has that ability to accelerate. I think we were pleasantly pleased to find that the planning processes of the council and the city have addressed these needs, and they're being addressed, and that process continues even into this construction season. How's that for dancing?
It's in there somewhere.
Mr. Coviello.
I don't want to speak for any other members of the board, but perhaps in my attempt to try and answer Councilor Dwyer's question was, the things that I narrowed in on was the one vehicle per 5 minutes leaving and entering a site. I couldn't see that being a big concern for the neighborhood as a traffic impact. And for me, the biggest concern was the Raleigh Way width, which appears to be a problem that's going to be addressed when the city finally gets there. So I don't know if that helps answer it, but that's what I'm narrowing it on.
I could just echo that too, because that's an important part. The report that we got indicated level of service A before and after, and that you don't do any better than level of service A.
Thank you, Tony.
Do we have enough clarification in the stipulations that we're adding, particularly the details, notes, and the sequencing schedule have to show 6 inches versus 4 inches alone, that we're going to require a construction management plan, and also the specific condition that final approval will be based upon the legal department weighing in, basically to satisfy that no municipal interest exists in that paper street? Just make sure those are on the record as the 3 that we're actually adding that aren't currently reflected on the plans that are before us.
Would that be acceptable to the maker of the motion?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Coker.
If I may address Councilor Dwyer's question, you asked, so I'm going to say this. I felt all along that the traffic study was more than adequate, and Tony's point about 1 car every 5 minutes really would not have that much, if any, impact at all. I think, and I'm going to speak just for myself, I think the City Council set an extraordinarily bad precedent by asking this board to reconsider, if you will, a specific application. I am very concerned about that.
I'm not sure that's what the city council did, but go ahead.
It had the net effect, let's put it that way, of, in my opinion, and again, this is just one person's opinion, that, in my opinion, that application should have been approved the last meeting. And because of some input, if you will, from the city council, it was delayed another month. I guess I'm just concerned about the future. The city council focusing on a single application. I know there was a larger issue involved, but all of our efforts, I think, should have produced a favorable vote at the last meeting, and they didn't. All of the issues that TAC looked at had been addressed, were addressed, adequately addressed, discussed, and I guess I would just be concerned for the future that the planning board has its job to do, and I think we did it well. And I'm not sure of, and I don't want to try to make the city council tell them how to do their jobs, but by the same token, I think it put me in a very uncomfortable position to have the city council tell us, in essence, how to do our job. So I guess I'll just leave it at that.
Well, with that being said, if there are no other questions, are you all set? Are you
Oh,
done?
I'm quite satisfied. I was
Okay.
satisfied a month ago.
Well, with that being said, there's been a motion to approve and seconded with conditions. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye. Now voting on item D for final subdivision approval. Do I hear a motion?
So moved with the additional condition, again, about the paper street, same condition that we added from the legal department review relative to Falkland Way.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye. Thank you. Moving on to application E. The application of SGB and RGB Ventures LLC owner for property located at 1800 Woodbury Avenue, wherein a conditional use permit is requested as allowed in Article 6, Section 10-608B of the zoning ordinance, to remove 3,191 square feet of asphalt pavement and construct a 2,292 square foot building and add 899 square feet of landscaped area within an inland wetland protection district. Said property is shown in Assessor Plan 239 as Lot 7-3 and lies within a general business district. David?
Mr. Chairman, this application was tabled at the Conservation Commission. They're looking for more information, so the department would recommend that you table it to your April 20th meeting.
So moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye. Moving on to
Chairman, before you start, as a direct abutter, I need to step down on F.
Thank you. Paige, you'll be a voting member on application F. The application of Porter Street Townhouse Homeowners Association, applicant for property located at 12 to 32 Porter Street, where an amended subdivision approval is requested to install an automatic parking gate on the sides of lots 46 and 57 on Assessor Plan 117, affecting access to the rear of lots 46, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, and 57. Said properties are shown on Assessor Plan 117 as lots 46 through 57 and lie within the Central Business B, Historic District A, and Downtown Overlay Districts. David?
Mr. Chairman, this is somewhat of an unusual request. We worked with the applicant to come up with this approach, and that is to treat it as a modification to the prior approved subdivision. Mr. Caldwell is here to address it, and you have our memorandum on this, which works with the applicant.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Corey Caldwell of Ames MSC, on behalf of the applicant. With me here tonight is Ellen Bullard of CP Management, property manager of the site, and various members of the Porter Street Townhouse Homeowners Association. As David indicated, this is an amendment to a previously approved 11-lot subdivision plan. 11 townhouses have since been built on this site, and all are now occupied. The owners would like to install 2 traffic control gates in front of their access drive on the north side of this property. One would be on Fleet Street, and the second would be on the Church Street side. These gates would be installed to prevent the public from driving into this access drive from both Church and Fleet Streets. The gates are automatic. They can be opened with telephone entry, card readers, push buttons, or a remote control in each vehicle, which the owners have opted to use. Each of the 11 owners would have a remote control in their car and therefore could open these gates from a distance so that the vehicles would be coming down the street. They can push the remote. The gate can open before they even get there. This is a nice feature, being able to open this from a distance, because we think it'll prevent any stacking on the adjacent streets. If a vehicle had to stop, get out, open the gate, that might be a situation with the city. However, being able to open these from a distance in your car, we feel would prevent any safety hazard. In your packets should be a technical specification sheet that explains all the features of the gate. It's a pretty high-tech thing. It's got a battery backup in the event of a power failure. The remotes, I understand, will still work even on the battery backup. We understand that you may want some input from the Traffic and Safety Committee of the city, and we have no objection to you seeking their input. We're here tonight seeking your approval for the installation of these 2 gates. Both Ellen, myself, and members of the association are here. I'd be happy to address any questions from board members. Thank you.
Ms. Hayden.
Take your pick.
Corey, you said they can be opened from a distance. How far a distance?
That's the magic question. I called the company today to determine that, and I did not get a clear answer. I apologize. I thought that would be an issue. I don't know.
Thank you.
I will have that answer in a couple days.
Maybe just as a follow-up to that, because maybe they open at 200 feet, but realistically, one can't get that close due to the intersection. So maybe the question, just to take that into consideration as
Yeah,
well.
I agree. It's an
Do you have
important
to be dead
question.
on to the unit, or that kind of thing? Thanks.
Mr. Coviello?
How do emergency vehicles open this?
They don't.
Emergency vehicles, I think in the case of emergency, this gate, this type of gate is not a rugged structure.
Do they break through?
It would be a breakthrough, yeah. Both a police vehicle or a fire truck could easily break through this gate.
Do they make gates that have some sort of capability to, I don't know if fire trucks have an ability or something, or I'm just thinking, it seems a little bizarre to require the fire department to break through the gate or ambulance.
Yeah, I agree. I think it would be a last case scenario. They can be opened via telephone. And maybe the solution is provide a telephone entry to the fire and police department, and that could be recorded. They can do it from their departments by dialing the phone.
Councilor Dwyer.
What alternatives were considered to accomplish the same purpose to this strategy?
Gate alternatives?
Broader than that.
Yeah, I don't think there were any, other than there was some talk about perhaps putting a swinging gate in. The problem with a swinging gate, it's a very nice site if you've seen it. It's old, historic. A wrought iron swinging fence would look nice. The problem with that is having to stop, get out, holding up traffic in the adjacent streets. We needed something that you could open from the seat of your car and from a distance. They're both busy streets, Church and Fleet Street more so than Church. And that's really why this gate was decided. It's something that can be opened from a distance, and it opens very quickly and closes automatically.
Mr. Coviello.
Does the HTC have any review of this? Have they had review? Will they?
Actually, in this case, your approval or consideration of it actually is what will trigger that.
Mr. Will.
Since the planning board doesn't have any purview over how something looks, and it doesn't seem to be in the way, it seems to be a reasonable addition to the property. Everything that my decision would hinge upon is whether or not this can be, remotely used, and how effectively can it be remotely used. And there seems to be a lot of I don't know answers to that question. I certainly have no problem with the way it looks or its location on the site, but I would feel uncomfortable voting for this if, for whatever reason, we don't know ahead of time how it's going to be worked. Is there some mechanism within the city that we work with emergency personnel, fire and police, or even just so a homeowner can hit a button and know that 30 feet down the road that gate's opening, whether they're turning a corner? I mean, in an age of cell phones, it would seem pretty logical that you hit a button in 20 feet, whether you're going, toward Islington Street on Congress Street and you're going to hit that left on Fleet Street or wherever you are, that you should be able to operate that. I don't know why there's an I don't know answer to that question.
We could also ask that it go back before traffic and safety, have city look at it.
Yeah, I think I would feel more comfortable with that.
So, but before you get there, I would just like to reiterate Ms. Hayden's comment about the fact that if we do get information back from the supplier of the gate, that they know that it's in a downtown area where there's a lot of brick structures. That Cindy's point's well taken. You need to be right on it. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, that was.
If
Cindy stole my original question, so,
I
but
think-
it sort of snowballed from there when other aspects of the same question started popping up.
So, Is that in some sort of motion that you were going to make, Mr. Ward?
I would love to. Why don't we move to table this or move this on to traffic and safety for review and report back? If I can
Second.
read lips.
Could we add to that motion that we also get the city's traffic engineer to weigh in on that?
I would love that. That's agreeable to the maker of the motion.
Motion to table's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye.
I'm assuming then this would come up at the April 20th planning board meeting if they could make it.
That's correct.
Because, as I understand it, just for point of clarification, as we tabled a public hearing, when we reopen it, we have another public hearing for
That's
public
correct.
input.
We'll take public input. And
Okay,
we'll let-
at
yes.
that time.
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, thank you. Moving on to item G. Item G, the application of Nash Family Investment Properties owner and Smutty Nose Brewing Company applicant for property located at 225 Heritage Avenue, wherein site plan approval is requested to construct a one-story, 16-foot 4-inch by 43-foot 8-inch building addition with related paving, utilities, landscaping, drainage, and associated site improvements. Said property is shown on Assessor Plan 284 as Lot 1 and lies within an industrial district. Who's here tonight on behalf of the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bernie Peelich on behalf of Smutty Nose, and John Shagnon from Amended Engineering is here, as well as Peter Eggleston from Smutty Nose. We have worked with the Technical Advisory Committee on this proposal. We've been to Traffic and Safety. We've also filed an application with a third committee to remove one tree which is in the city right-of-way. And although I'm assured by Attorney Laughlin and Everett Kern that it's not going to be a problem, that public hearing has not occurred yet, but will be occurring in April due to the fact that somebody forgot to post the public notice in the newspaper. But in any event, we would ask that this site plan review be approved, conditioned upon getting approval from the Beautification and Tree Committee to remove the one tree which is on city property in the median of Heritage Ave. It's a pretty small proposal, a very small addition, which John Shagnon will explain, and we think that we do meet all of the criteria. We've received a favorable recommendation from Traffic and Safety. We received a favorable recommendation from the Technical Advisory Committee, and we would ask that it be approved this evening. If you have any questions, hopefully John Shagnon can answer them for you. Thank you.
John Shagnon from Amended Engineering. Also here is John DeStefano from DeStefano Associates, who's going to be the project manager, and David Yarrington, the chief brewmaster at Smutty Nose Brewery. As Bernie mentioned, it's a minor addition. In fact, it's 16-foot 4 by 43-foot 8. The addition is on the south side of the building, and inside will be 3 tanks to hold material that's used in the brewing process. They're actually going to be also adding an additional silo, an exterior silo, on the outside of the building as a part of this application. The plan is to do this in increments, 1 tank at a time, as the business increases and gets better. Business is good. That's why they're here looking for an expansion. Another part of this application is to take the materials that are outside and bring them inside. If you've been by the site, that process is ongoing. They're going to be taking over the north half of the building, which was leased to someone else. So interior, there'll be some walls that are taken down. There'll be some expansion of space. and that will allow them to reorganize the whole operation and bring everything that's currently outside inside the building. We're going to be striping some parking spaces. Currently, there's no striped parking on the site. The plan is to stripe parking spaces along the west line and on the north side of the building, and also enclose the dumpster, which is the dumpster's there now, but it's not in an enclosure. So that's another thing that will be done. The plan set has 3 sheets, C1 being existing conditions, C2 shows the site improvements, and C3 is a building elevation. As Bernie mentioned, the Technical Advisory Committee did approve it. They tabled it at their January 31st meeting so that we could go to the Board of Adjustment and obtain some variances. Those were granted on the 21st of February. We needed a variance for a 19-foot aisle on the north side of the building. We're not changing the pavement at all, and in fact, this plan was approved back in 1982 when it was constructed, and the width there met the rules. The rules have since changed, so the Board of Adjustment did grant that variance. The second variance was needed for parking within 100 feet of residential property. The site backs up to the Patriots Park residential complex. Those variances were granted. As Bernie mentioned, the Traffic and Safety Committee has also looked at the site and approved it on February 9th. One of the things that came out of meeting with them was a desire to remove a portion of the island, the existing island in Heritage Avenue, to provide better flow, exit flow from the north side exit, so that it's now, if you if you're taking a left turn, you kind of have to make a diagonal. So the Traffic and Safety Committee asked us if we would remove that island to provide for better flow, and there is one tree in that space that needs to be removed, so hence the need to go get a tree removal on city land permit. February 28th, the Technical Advisory Committee approved the plan, or sent it to you, with 7 stipulations. We don't have any problem addressing those stipulations. I'll just run through it briefly. Number 1 was the tree removal. We have made that application. Number 2 was to replace the signage with do not enter signs, and we have so noted that on the plan. The committee was concerned about an area in the back that currently is a puddles or tends to puddle, so we've shown some regrading to address that issue. In addition, we're showing a note here about removing some debris that has clogged the drainage system on the north side. It's actually on the abutter's lot to the north. The drainage flows down a swale and then exits going north along Heritage Avenue, and there's a blockage to the culvert. So we're going to be removing that debris, and we feel that the drainage system will work after that's done. We've made a note about the sprinkler covering 100% of the building, a Knox box being installed. Those are 5 and 6. And stipulation 7 related to the site bond. At the Technical Advisory Committee meeting, we spoke about the separation between the tenant, the leasee, Smutty Nose Brewery, and the property owner. The property owner was going to be paving or repaving the entire lot as a matter of general upkeep and maintenance. And when the issue came up about fixing the area in the back, we had made a request that possibly 2 bonds be prepared, one for the owner, one for the applicant, to keep the cost down for the applicant. However, since that time, the applicant is willing to go to a site review agreement and bond for all of the improvements except for the overlay of the front side. So he's going to bond to fix the back. That was really not requested and is sort of just something that the landlord had promised to do as general upkeep. So we'll let the landlord do that at some future time. But everything else will be bonded in the site review agreement. So really stipulation 7, you can leave it in there, but it doesn't apply anymore. I hope that wasn't too long an explanation to an easy answer. If you got any questions, I'd be glad to give you answers, and hopefully we can get your approval here tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Will.
Just very briefly, in the memorandum, Mr. Allen asked about the swale. This is in 3 paragraphs, and I think it's related to stipulation 7. He noted that they will need a note to clarify what the fix is, and you just sort of explained how there's sort of an agreement between the leaseor and the owner of the property, but I don't see a note to that effect on the plan. Is that because it's still pending? The details are still pending?
There is a note on the plan. It's on sheet C1, because on sheet C2, the view is blocked out. So on C1, there's a note of removing the debris in front of the culvert.
Yeah, I believe that's more related to an earlier stipulation. The stipulation 7 that you mentioned was a long explanation for something simple.
Okay.
I believe that was what Dave Allen was referring to. He noted some similarity to the paving, but he said he was talking about, I believe...
Yeah, he was, the stipulation talks about pavement and drainage concerns. What happened is, at the first Technical Advisory Committee meeting, there wasn't any mention of the puddle in the back.
Certainly.
Okay? It's sort of, the tenant is very aware of it. It is an issue, but he was going to have, or the landlord had promised to fix it when he did the repaving. Right before the end of the discussion at the technical advisory level, the committee felt that we should address it.
Okay.
So we were caught a little off guard, and we're kind of trying to think about how the applicant could get the landlord to do it, so to speak. But
or that there be some agreement between the two of you, but from
Right.
what you're saying, it's really, the onus is now on you.
Correct.
Not so much an agreement between the two of you placed on a plan.
Correct. We're going to take it over in the interest of expediency and getting the job done.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Coviello.
Maybe just to help me out and educate me, what shimmering is?
Shim. Should say shim.
Yes, Mr. DeFos had concerns about the backyard. He was unsure whether the pavement needed to be removed between the pond and the swale, or shimmering could be done. Does it just mean shim?
Shimming.
It meant shimming.
All right. Wasn't sure if it was
Thing is,
something I haven't heard.
If you
before.
have pavement that has like a big, you'll notice it on rural highways a lot. There'll be a sort of a groove where the tires go, because it gets more pressure than the rest of the road. So before the pavement is repaved, a shim is done, and that's a procedure where they sort of fill in the hole before you put an even coat on the
I
top.
follow you now. It was
Okay.
just the wording was too funny.
It should say shim or shimming.
Any other questions? I've got a few questions. Could we see some details and if, however this plays out, for the dumpster pad and the wood fence enclosure? I didn't see anything on the drawings.
Okay. They would have to do that in accordance with the ordinance, but if you want to make that a stipulation, we could
If
put
it
a
gets
detail
that
on
one,
there.
it would. I have just two more questions. Any erosion control measures shown on the north side? I see this all drains to the north and then runs to that swale. It'd be nice if we put some erosion control measures down when you're going to grind and repave that.
That's a good point. Yep.
The other issue or question that I have is, on the south side, there's a new door, canopy, and ramp. is that to have any handicap access? There's no proposed grades on that. I don't know if that's a handicap accessible entrance or not.
No, I don't believe it is. The accessible route is to the front door along the sidewalk.
Okay,
Okay? That door is because when they put the third tank in, they're going to be closing in an existing door. So at that time, then they would put that in.
okay. So
But it's not the accessibility route.
Okay. And also on the, in addition, if we could get a detail for the solid wood fence around the Bbq Pit, just to detail what that fence will look like.
I think that's unusual, but it's just going to be a fence, as in a fence that you would put up along a property line.
Okay.
I don't know that they would have picked that yet. They
Okay,
probably.
that's fine.
All right, thanks.
Those were the only questions that I had. Anybody else on the board got any other questions for the applicant? No? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I will now open it up to the public hearing. Anybody in the public wish to speak to, for, or against the application? Second time, anybody in the public to, for, or against? Third time, seeing no one rise, I'll now close the public hearing. Pleasure, board.
We approve with stipulations?
Move to approve with stipulations. Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye. Thank you. Moving on to application H. The Portsmouth Planning Board, acting pursuant to New Hampshire RSA 12-G:13 and Chapter 400 of the Pease Development Authority Site Review Regulations, will review and make a recommendation to the Board of Directors of the Pease Development Authority regarding the following. The application of Lonza Biologics, Inc., applicant for property located at 101 International Drive, wherein site plan approval is requested for the construction of a three-story, 299,000 square foot addition to an existing building and temporary construction facilities with related paving, utilities, landscaping, drainage, and associated site improvements. Said property is shown on Assessor Plan 305 as lots 1, 2, and 6, and lies within the Airport Business District. Who's here tonight on behalf of the applicant?
Good evening. I'm John Michalski from Lonza, representing Lonza Biologics, and also with me tonight. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Yes. Yeah. Also with me tonight is Greg Michaelitis from Appledore, Paul Fleming from Lonza, and Maria Stoll from the PDA. It's a pleasure to be back here. We were here about a year and a half ago. I think it was September of 2004 on basically a very similar plan to this. Our objective with this expansion is to kind of build on what we've done over the last 5 years. We've invested about $250 million at Pease over the last 5 years, and this is the next phase of that. What you're going to see tonight is, again, it's very similar to what we had in front of the planning board back in September. At the time we delayed that expansion, it was approved with stipulations by the board, and due to business reasons, we have pushed this off. We're coming back now again on this. Over the past 6 months, we've worked very closely with the PDA as well as the city on this project and bringing these expansion plans back to life. We expect to, this project will be built in 2 phases. We're going to be fitting out about half of this facility initially with a production and admin space. This first phase will be started around May of this year, assuming that we have all our permits and plans are in place. We're targeting a start date very soon, and we would expect to have that in operation by about 2008. The second phase will be more or less an empty shell space with the anticipation we would fit that out with manufacturing space as the business permits. We expect that this expansion is going to bring about 200 jobs to the site, two Ps in addition to the, I think we're about 600 right now. And our request tonight is for planning board approval on the site plans you have in front of you, which is the expansion itself, about 300,000 square feet across 3 floors, as well as plans for temporary laydown space and contractor parking and the like to be able to do this. As part of this project, we'll have a significant number of tradespeople and contractors on the site. I think we have about 300 spaces planned as part of the expansion plan here on this property behind our facility. With that, I'll turn over to Greg Michaelitis from Appledore, and Greg will give you some more details on the technical aspects of the plan.
Thank you.
Good evening, Greg Michaelitis from Appledore Engineering. What I passed out to you folks is a miniature colored plan of the same plan we have here. If you're familiar with Lonza, their existing facility is here, and your light gray on your plan is the existing pavement. The expansion John talked about is what is shown in the darker orange. It's a 97,000 square foot footprint. That's about 2,000 square foot larger than the plan you saw back in September '04. And really, the differences are just some jogs in the building that the architect has now finished the building design. What you can see here is this darker pavement. We will continue the ring road. If you're familiar with the site, it now comes through here. There's a stand of trees, and there's utilities that run right through this area here. We're now bringing the utilities around the building, bringing the pavement. We're adding about 18 parking spaces here. One of the things about Lonza out here is we've been working with them for about 10 years, and we've done a lot of master planning for them. So there's not a lot of infrastructure changes that we have to make. There was always anticipated there was going to be a couple building expansions. When we built the detention pond years ago, we sized it for this expansion. So really all we're doing, we did a detailed drainage analysis. We've updated our state permits, but all we're doing is just correcting modifying the outlet structure. There is a water quality unit that'll be installed. Actually, it's already installed. There's a water quality unit there for treatment. So we already have our state permit for this expansion. As you may recall, last time we were before you years ago, Lonza put in a parking deck. And again, that was the anticipation for this additional employees. So parking is adequate, more than adequate for even this expansion. Perhaps the new thing that I'll just refresh your memories from last time is what is referred to as the flat iron parcel out at Pease. For reasons, as you can see, the last expansion, this whole area was used for construction and all the trails and so forth. So what you're seeing in orange over here, there's 13 different trailers for the trades, for different engineering disciplines. There'll be a cafeteria with utilities, restrooms, temporary utilities. And then what you're looking at in yellow here will be a large gravel parking lot that will be used. It's up to 390 spaces for construction workers, between 300 or 400 construction workers that they anticipate out there at the maximum build out. It's also a large laydown area here. We're creating a temporary stormwater detention pond with a outlet unit there again, and that'll all be removed. At one of the stipulations last time was that when this area is when construction's done, this gets returned to its natural state. We'll pull all the utilities out, all the detention. That was a condition of the PDA Board of Directors, as well as you folks last time. I think that really covers it. I mean, what I'd like to do is I'd like to just take a brief minute and go through the March 2nd TA's Technical Advisory Committee notes and just assure you that we've addressed all those conditions. Number one was that all stipulations from the previous planning board approval, September 23rd, '04, be remain in full force, which they are. At that point, you had asked for some temporary barriers. The concern was that this gravel lot was getting close to Corporate Drive, so we're showing some concrete barriers there, temporary, so traffic would not outlet over the curb. That both lots are part of the application, which they are. You read that in your public notice. That the flat iron parcel be returned to pre-existing conditions. That's on sheet C7, note 1. A note about fire alarms on a single control panel, note 17, C3. DPW be involved with updating the sewer discharge permit. There's a note on C3, note 18. Gooseberry Drive be rebuilt. You'll notice on your a portion of Gooseberry Drive. You'll notice the darker portion of gray. That drainage needs to be improved. That there is no the existing drainage out there isn't working. We're proposing some new catch basins out there, as well as pavement when construction's over. That's on sheet C2, note 10. and hay bales be installed along the swale, temporary parking area. That's shown on sheet C8. New stipulations from the recent TAC meeting that we extend the sidewalk along the rear frontage of the property. You'll notice on your plans that the sidewalk now extends all the way to Lonza's frontage, if you will, on Goose Bay. That we held a meeting with the Planning Department, Public Works, to talk about, there is some deterioration of a swale out here. We met out there yesterday with a number of city staff. Lonza's agreed to make a contribution to an upgrade of that swale. Maria Stoll is here tonight from PDA. Lonza will be giving Maria a check, and we talked about that yesterday, the dynamics of that. So Lonza has agreed to that stipulation. There was another stipulation regarding an outline of water and sewer usage. John wrote a letter to Dave Allen March 6th. I'm not sure it's in your packet, but there is a detailed letter outlining the water and sewage usage. And there was a question from Deb Finnegan regarding Steve Pernoff's traffic study. The way it works at Pease, the traffic study is used to generate a traffic impact fee for improvements by the PDA. And again, Lonza has agreed to, they're working with Maria as far as a traffic impact fee that will be paid directly to Maria. And Steve Pernoff provided Deb Finnegan some backup calculations. She had a question during the TAC meeting. And that's really it. It's a wonderful project for the Seacoast. It's a wonderful investment Lonza's making out here. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Mr. Hopley.
Just a quick question. Did the PDA absolutely want none of the construction traffic leaving onto corporate right off the parking lot? You mentioned the concrete barrier to prevent going over the curb. I was just looking at the huge impact of a mass exodus, of construction workers all loading up the corporate at Goose Bay intersection. And if there was a directional exit out of that lot that would send people basically, I guess, east, not cross traffic, but east and go out the old back gate, would that help alleviate some, which looks like we're going to send everything one way?
Right. That actually came from the Portsmouth TAC. The PDA, we went back to them and said this is what Portsmouth wanted. So I think that's open for discussion. One of the reasons we also had it, we want to control the traffic, control materials, theft, even any tracking of materials, if you will. You know what I mean? If we're bringing everything one way, we can kind of have a better sense of what's going on out there.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant? Mr. Coviello.
Could you explain why, I see you've got the, protecting the stormwater, I'm sorry, the wetland area and the laydown area. You have a silt fence and a hay bale barrier. The hay bale barrier for some reason stops at the storage area for the disciplines, but the silt fence continues. What, I guess, why does one stop and one not?
The reason for that is, we put silt fence kind of to define the limits of construction, if you will. If you look at the grading plan, we've tried to bring the grading to a couple of swales out there. I don't have the plan in front of me, but there is a small swale that runs this way, and then a larger swale that runs this way and comes to the detention pond. So that's probably why I don't have the right details in front of me, but certainly, there's inspection requirements, best management practice. If you look at the erosion control detail notes, there's a detailed, the contractor will be required to put in extra hay bales if necessary. I mean, that's ongoing work. It's not just draw it on the picture and that's it. They're required as part of the best management practice. We're going to have an NPDES permit. As part of that permit, the federal permit, they're going to be required to, control any erosion out there. So, I mean, we draw what, that's the starting point. And then actually one of the stipulations too is an erosion control bond, which that came up at the TAC meeting last time, and Lonza has agreed to that. We're going to build that right into the construction contract.
It appears to me, I just applaud you, that you're using the Gove study setbacks. Is that correct?
Correct.
thank you for doing that. That's great.
Ms. Hayden?
Greg, is there any temporary lighting out in that construction worker parking area?
We're not proposing it, right, John?
Just wondering if you saw that as a site safety issue there. That's going to be there temporarily for quite a while, but.
Right.
If we could, Greg, if we could have his name for the record, please.
Paul Fleming from Lonza. What he just conveyed to me was there will be lighting for the trailers, so they'll have some security lighting around the trailers.
Okay.
It's not a problem.
Okay.
And just as a follow-up, any new lighting proposed for the site? Is it dark sky friendly?
It's going to match what's out there, Cindy. And actually, what I failed to mention too, which is a significant improvement, we've actually gone through all the landscaping, and if you look on the landscaping plan, we're pulling out a lot of the old landscaping that was put in with the original building, and I think we're planting 82 trees or something, which includes that parking area right in front of the original building, if you will, as well as street trees around back and along Goose Bay.
And so now is what's there for existing lighting? That went in quite a while. Was that dark sky
They're modern
friendly?
fixtures. They're with the shoe boxes. They're pointing down.
And so the new lighting will
Yeah,
essentially.
it's the same. It just matches that.
Thanks.
I think, though, what you're trying to avoid, Greg, I don't know is what you have was dark sky friendly, because I don't think we were requiring it at that time.
Well, yeah, it's matching existing. That's what we've called on our plans. If you want something different, I guess we need to look at
Where
that.
the board's heading is, if you could make sure that anything new is dark sky friendly, that would probably be the improvement.
Okay. Yeah, we are putting new lighting around the perimeter here.
Any other questions for the applicant? No? Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Anybody in the public wish to speak to or against the application? Second time, anybody in the public to or against? Third time, seeing no one rise, I'll close the public hearing.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Well.
I'd like to move that we approve the application as presented with the following stipulations, the 10 stipulations and the additional 7 stipulations in the plan.
Was the dark sky friendly going to be?
Thank you. With the dark sky friendly, anything else I'm missing, any other additions?
I don't think so.
Second.
Moved and seconded?
Mr. Chair, it's been my personal history that I don't vote for applications on the Pease Development Authority if they have construction within the 100-foot wetlands buffer. But I have to say, I am incredibly impressed with the work that the PDA and Lonza and the city have done together to make this workable. Seeing 50-foot setbacks in a temporary area and 100-foot setbacks in other places is a good step in the right direction. And I think this serves as an example of what we could do, not just for wetlands on Pease, but everything from recreational land use to amending our land use regulations and having a greater master plan of where to go forward with Pease now. 15 years ago, we had regulations that were written that we're still using, and Pease is a much different place. I think if we work together, we can get things like this constructed that I'm incredibly impressed with. So I'm going to enthusiastically vote in favor of this.
Any other additional
Just in case there was any question.
comments on the motion? No? Hearing none, I'll call all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye.
You've seen the light, Rainey.
I didn't know if you'd
This
catch.
one was a well-lighted.
Ray, do you want all these copies of these with the buffer zone?
I'll pass them out to the kids at church. How's that sound?
Have this framed.
Moving on to application, item I. The Portsmouth Planning Board is conducting a public hearing to take public comment on proposed amendments to the city's subdivision rules and regulations as amended. The amendment coordinates expiration language. Copies of the proposed amendments are on file in the Planning Department office and available for public inspection.
That's me. This is the best part of the night. In my effort to clean up the subdivision regulations to an extent, I am coordinating the language in both, I'll speak to both, but the site review regulations and the subdivision regulations to mirror what is in the zoning ordinance for Board of Adjustment approvals for variances and special exceptions. The key change is that we receive a request and we act on it within a year period from the time an application was approved. And in the case of the subdivision regulations, a one-year extension would be allowed under this, and no other extensions would be allowed. And I took out the brief reference to what would be required for final plat, because that is in Section 5 of the subdivision rules and regulations. That's it in a nutshell as far as the subdivision. I broke it into 2 paragraphs, making it a little easier to read, and that's all on the subdivision.
Mr. Coker.
A couple of questions, Lucy. First, on the site review.
Okay. We'll
Do
go
I
through
read this properly that says there will be one-year extension, or can an applicant get multiple one-year extensions? In other words, they get an extension, that time runs out, they get another extension.
Under the site review regulations, there is criteria in paragraph 2 of the bolded portion, where if you ask for additional one-year extensions, there's criteria in the site review regulations for which we weigh giving a second year, 1 year. We do it in increments of 1 year.
Okay, that's what I wanted to just.
But the first one is almost automatic, because there are a lot of other permits that may be needed before they can obtain a building permit.
On the subdivision rules and regulations, I unfortunately didn't bring my rules and regulations. Is there an equivalent in the planning process in subdivision rules and regulations or site review of the equivalent to a variance, that the Board of Adjustment grants a variance? Is there an equivalent in the?
I would say that would be a waiver within the subdivision rules and regulations.
Then I would propose one minor change.
Okay.
In the subdivision rules and regulations, in your first paragraph, it ends with no other extensions may be requested or granted.
Well, I would assume that if it can't be requested, it can't be granted.
One could request a waiver. And let me tell you why I asked this question. There was an application a number of years back that had, it wasn't planning, it was zoning, but they actually asked for a variance based on the 1 year application had lapsed, and they asked for a variance to that term. It was a very novel use of a variance. And if you want to know which one it was, I'm happy to say, because it wasn't with the planning board. To illustrate my point, do you want to know who it was specifically? So
that's not necessary. We can.
Okay, but my point is that if there is a granting of a waiver, that waiver would be or could be presented as I request a waiver on the extension. If we use the language, no other extensions may be requested or granted, that's set in concrete.
What if it were?
However, the issue will still come to you whether or not to do it. You can't stop somebody from requesting something.
But we can say in our language that don't even bother to ask, because it's not going to be
Right,
requested or
but I mean, you're
granted.
still not going to stop it coming to you. Your point's well made, but it's up to this board to decide whether or not you're going to grant it.
Still ask.
So,
Well, see, that's where I disagree. If we put in or granted at the end of that sentence, then why bother to ask? That's my point. That's all.
What's the rest of the board think? Any other?
I don't know, I think the language, no other extensions may be requested, means it can't even request it. That seems to be pretty reasonable.
That's my sentiment.
I'm an applicant, and I say I would like I request a waiver based on your
then-
1 year extension.
Let me see if I can take this. Then they're requesting a waiver of anything, a waiver that we must therefore grant. And let me tell you, in 11 years on the planning board, I've never, ever, ever seen us grant a waiver of subdivision rules and regulations. Now, maybe I'm wrong.
Never's a long time.
Well, never in 12 years.
Okay.
That's, yeah, I'm saying never in 12 years. That said, I think that's a pretty strict interpretation. That waivers, I think, have to be done by a 2/3 vote of the planning board, not even a majority vote. It has to be 2/3. Correct. 6 votes. So what we're doing here by saying you can't even request this, and to request it, you've got to have a waiver, and a waiver is a 2/3 vote. That's about as restrictive as it gets, Don.
Well, let's get anybody else on the board have any opinion or flavor on that? Ms. Hayden.
I think we're covered because we never have to accept anybody's request. Just
Yeah.
they,
That's
you know.
true. I mean, you know.
I always thought we were covered on variances too, but that, that one incident was the one that brought this to mind, so.
I think based upon what we've heard, we ought to leave it the way it is.
Okay, that's fine. I withdraw my question.
Any other comments? I do believe we need to open this up for public comment, don't we?
Yes.
Anybody in the public wish to speak 2 for or against? 2 for or against?
Would you please stand in line?
Third time, say no one rise. Close the public hearing.
We need to do the site review now.
Well, what's the board's wish, too?
Oh,
Does
that's
that mean?
Move we approve as written by Ms. Tilton.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye. I should have read J along with it, but I'll read item J. The Portsmouth Planning Board is conducting a public hearing to take public comment on proposed amendments to the city's site review regs as amended. The amendment coordinates expiration language. Copies of the proposed amendments are on file in the Planning Department office and available for public inspection. Lucy?
Again, the key language is that the request be received and acted upon within the 1-year period. For clarification, I broke it into 2 paragraphs. The criteria for granting the additional year remains the same as in the site review regulations as they are written today. So,
Okay.
and this will now coordinate the expiration language for variances, special exceptions, preliminary subdivisions, and site review.
Any comments? Any questions? No? I'll open up the public hearing. Anybody in the public wish to speak 2 for or against? 2 for or against? Third time, say no and rise. Close the public hearing.
Move as written by the department.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And the chair votes aye. Moving on to item 3, City Council referrals and requests. Item A, letter from Attorney Douglas McDonald regarding driveway permit application for property located at 62 Deer Street. David?
The department thought we'd have a recommendation for you and have all the materials available, but we're actually still compiling them, so we'd ask you to table this to the 420 meeting, and also we will invite Attorney McDonald to that meeting.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye. Moving on to item B, request to purchase unnamed lane abutting Pleasant Street.
We've talked to Mr. Thorson. They're continuing their legal work. We've agreed that we will table it to a time uncertain so that we can notify anyone when this item comes up. We don't anticipate it appearing on an agenda much before June. So the recommendation would be to table it to a time uncertain.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And the chair votes aye. Moving on to item 4, amended site plan review. Item A, 1950 Lafayette Road, request for additional utility pole.
We've had board may recall that you recently approved a site plan for 1950 Lafayette Road. There have been some problems relocating utilities. The city met with PSNH and with the applicant, and we think a good compromise has been reached that allows everyone to go forward. We're recommending approval of the amendment, but because it's affects a utility pole, we thought it best that we inform the board, and the applicant is here to address it to any degree that the board feels appropriate.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, but I have to step down for this application.
Anybody have any questions for the applicant? Anybody? No?
Then we would recommend that you approve the amendment to the plan. And they can go home and read War and Peace.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye.
Brilliant presentation.
Best one all night.
And any other housekeeping items, David?
I believe we're pretty much set. You may want to indicate that the RFP process on the rewrite of the rezoning, or of the zoning ordinance continues, and we'll probably be reporting to the board shortly.
Well said. Motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Good night.
Hasta la vista.